10 spot. At first, this photo just looks like a silly good time between two boys, but what happens next is when it gets kind of crazy. The two in the photo are brothers, Michael and Sean McQuilkin, and it is from August 20th, 1975, when they were at Morro Rock in Sequoia National Park in California. The photo was taken by their sister Mary after they all thought that their hair standing up was absolutely hilarious and decided to snap a few photos to remember the moment. Well, they surely will never forget it, because just a few moments after this photo was taken, they were actually struck by lightning. One of the brothers said that he raised his hand into the air and that the ring he had on was buzzing, and then suddenly they were all on the ground and smoke was pouring out of Sean's back. The good news is that they all survived the lightning that day, but I bet it certainly wasn't the day that they had planned. In our number 9 spot, this photo was taken by David Seymour in 1948. This photo was taken in Warsaw, and the child in the photo is named Tereska, who was in a home for emotionally disturbed children after being raised in a concentration camp. The drawing on the blackboard is what she drew when the children were asked to draw home. While it is obviously common for children to have indistinguishable drawings, her backstory and the look in her eyes really tell a story. I hope she was able to grow and overcome some of the horrible things that she had been put through. I really wish I could know exactly what she was trying to draw and depict. In our number 8 spot, this is a photo from 1991 and is of Rajiv Gandhi, who is the 6th Prime Minister of India. He took office after his mother had been assassinated and was the youngest Prime Minister at only 40 years old. This photo was taken by a 21-year-old local photographer named Haribabu, but little did everyone know, this would be the last photo he took and the last photo ever taken of Rajiv. Moments after this photo was taken, the woman in the bottom left corner with the orange flowers in her hair approached Rajiv, and when she bent down to touch his feet, she detonated a belt of explosives that she had on under her dress. This explosion ended up killing them all and around 13 other people. Haribabu's camera ended up staying intact throughout the blast, and this is how we were able to retrieve this photo. Coming in at number 7. This photo carries quite the backstory. This photo is of Violet Spears, who was born in Elgin, Scotland in 1839. She was married at 15, and by the time she was 22, she had 4 children. At 33, her husband ended up passing away due to a hunting accident, and Violet then packed up her and the kids and went to her sister's, where they all remained for 2 years. After these 2 years, Violet just disappeared from her sisters, leaving all of her children behind. No one heard from her for a year after she left, but money began to be sent to them monthly. In 1876, a medium and hypnotist named Madame Violet began to gain popularity in Edinburgh. She had a small following at the time that she called her Hive. Slowly, her seances began to get more elaborate and outrageous, and she slowly began to ask clients to donate small bits of blood, saying that it helped her connect to the spirits. She would actually drink the blood given to her, and she has been quoted saying that this element returned to me, had been missing my whole life. Eventually her hive grew, and they all ended up living together and would only come out at night. They would attract and convince men and women, usually with the help of drugs and alcohol, to donate a bit of blood, and most often would convince these people to leave their lives to come and join the hive. The hive continued to grow for the coming decade, but when the son of a prominent councilman joined the hive and ended up developing an infection from the bloodletting and actually died, the hive was condemned and they ended up being disbanded. Madame Violet ended up living until 1930, where she died at the age of 90. In our number 6 spot, this photo comes from what is left of the Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. This prison used to be the most famous and the most expensive in the world, but now this is the sort of thing that is left of it. This prison is actually now used as a tourist attraction, and it becomes a haunted house during Halloween. The prison used to house some pretty high-profile prisoners, such as Scarface himself, Al Capone. The prison was opened in 1829 and was known for its advanced technology for the time. Things like central heating, flush toilets, and shower baths in each cell. These were all considered luxuries in 1829. The first prisoner to be held there was Charles Williams, who was facing a 2-year sentence for theft. When he arrived at the prison, he had a hood over his head so as to protect his identity, but also so that he wouldn't know what the rest of the prison looked like, so he would be unable to plan an escape. While prison is never good, the craziest thing about this specific one is that all the prisoners lived in isolation. I can't even imagine what that would be like, especially for the people who found themselves in there for long periods of time. Number 5. This photo is a series of self-portraits by the artist William Uttermohlen. In 1995, William was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which is an incredibly difficult thing to have to go through. William's self-portraits obviously reflect a lot of what was going on in his mind during some of the last years of his life. Part of what Alzheimer's does is that it affects the part of the brain that we use for visualizing things, which is part of the reasons why the paintings began to get so different from the original. This series of paintings is actually sometimes used as a study material for medical students because it does such a wonderful job at portraying something that a person without Alzheimer's wouldn't be able to understand. I think William left the world with something very sad, but also beautiful, poignant, and important. Number 4. This photo comes from the 19th century from the Third Plague pandemic. This was the first time that the plague had spread to all 5 continents. While we now know something about what that might have been like, what we haven't had to endure are doctors that are dressed like this. This is a photo of the outfits and masks that plague doctors wore when they would come to your house to treat or diagnose you. The long beak-like noses of the masks are very creepy, but they were used to hold herbs and other nicely scented things because they believed that this would help ward off the bad air, which at the time is what they thought was causing the sickness. The COVID-19 pandemic has been bad enough, so I'm very glad that our doctors and nurses can stick to their scrubs and regular masks. There's something about these outfits that just make it seem like something bad is about to happen. Number 3. This photo looks like a big lump of nothing, but it is called an elephant's foot. Don't worry, at first I was worried, but it has nothing to do with elephants and is only named that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown and is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still produce a deadly amount, but it is said that if you stood in front of it for just 300 seconds, that would be enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it, but I'm glad because now we get to see it and it gives us just a little more insight into what happened that day. Number 2. This photo is of a man named Chris McCandless, who may be better known as Alex Supertramp. Chris was a traveler who inspired the book and movie Into the Wild, which were created to follow the story of his life, and more specifically his final great Alaskan adventure. This photo is unfortunately the last photo taken of Chris while he was on this Alaskan trip, and he ended up passing away in the wilderness. A lot of people have speculated that this photo was taken as his sort of goodbye. It is highly debated how he died, so there isn't quite a concrete answer of what exactly happened to him. It is a very unfortunate end to such a young man's life, but he left quite a legacy. His story has inspired countless people and holds a special place in a lot of people's lives. He was a man who rejected conformity and materialism, and with his life and death he really left an important message for all of us to take a step back and remember what is really important. While the story has such a sad ending, there's also a lot of beautiful things that we can take from it. And in our number 1 spot today, this photo was taken by Fred Blackwell on May 28th, 1963, and is actually showing us a moment of protest. The 3 sitting at the counter are Joan Trumpour, Anne Moody, and their sociology teacher, John Salter. The reason why this photo is so important is because these 3 are sitting at a white-only counter at Woolworth's Five and Dime store in Jackson, Mississippi, while being assaulted by an angry mob. People are throwing condiments at them and I'm sure saying some pretty nasty things. The 2 students went to Tougaloo College, which was a black college that ended up being at the core of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. It's amazing to see how brave they are, and a photo like this really is such an important message for us to remember today.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Hook Island sea monster. Ah yes, another reason to avoid the ocean, as if our channel wasn't that already. This photo was taken back in 1964. This photo apparently is a sea monster off the coast of Hook Island. This thing is roughly 90 feet in length, so it's pretty noticeable, especially in shallow waters. A man named Robert LeSerac spotted it while he was with his family. He noticed its tail was injured, but its head was massive. Those are the 2 noticeable features. Injured tail and a big old head. It looked like a giant tadpole, but many believe it's a giant tarp, but there's not enough evidence either way. What do you guys think? Is it some sort of mythological creature, or maybe a now extinct species of fish, or just an optical illusion? Maybe just a shadow, or a big rock. It could be a rock. Either way, avoid those shallow areas. Stingrays alone? No way. Catch me in a lake. Number 9, the skunk ape. This one is exactly what it sounds like. How fun. The skunk ape was seen back in 2000, so hopefully, if it was a real thing, it's long gone by now. Or it's since reproduced and we're screwed. 2 photos were taken of this skunk ape creature. This thing looks like Bigfoot's cooler, older cousin. You know, the cousin who has a lava lamp and does kickflips in the garage in October? That's the skunk ape compared to Bigfoot. Bigfoot's old news. Get him out of here. What does he do anyways besides... Guy's boring. Doesn't do any kickflips. This guy for sure. This guy haunts families, it seems. An anonymous source sent the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department these photos. They mailed them, which for starters, how jarring would that be to open 9 a.m. in the morning? But she claims these photos were taken in her backyard and that this creature was not a black bear. I don't think that's a black bear. If anything, it's a really large dog. Those teeth alone are a red flag either way. Closing that door. Good night. Number 8, Phoenix lights. Turning the calendars back to 1997, a time long before Photoshop. This photo here shows a series of unidentified aerial phenomena. It's just hovering over Phoenix, Arizona. They were bright and they stuck around for a few hours. This was also only 1 year after the movie Independence Day came out, so I'm sure this freaked a lot of residents out. Or maybe it's fake because of the movie. Who knows? That's why I'm here. There's many eyewitness reports of the Phoenix lights, so much so that an explanation was demanded. So the US Air Force came forward and said the lights were flares dropping during a training exercise. Yeah, just a casual training night exercise over the city of Phoenix, Arizona. Classic, we always see those. This obviously worried people and the Air Force took responsibility, yet later on in 2007 and 2008, the same lights returned over the city. The same lights returned in the same spot. Still, there has been no explanation that makes any sense. Drones? Maybe? Was it too soon? I don't know. Drones are good. Drones are too good now. That bowling alley video of the drone whipping through? Way too good. So you never know. Number 7, Battle of Los Angeles. Of course, we have to mention one of the most unspeakable battles of all time on this list. The Battle of LA, otherwise known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, happened during World War II. It happened right at the end of February 1942. This event, first of all, took place only a few months after the Pearl Harbor attack, so everybody was obviously a little stressed out at this point. Something like 25 enemy aircraft was spotted flying over LA in the late hours of February 24th, so air raids went off. Blackouts were now in effect. This was not a drill. Or was it? At this point, it didn't look like a drill. Artillery fire, machine guns, anti-aircraft shells were all going off. It was loud, it was bright, and in total, around 1,400 shells were fired off. 2 people had heart attacks as this unfolded. 5 people died in total from this retaliation, and it was all a false alarm. Apparently. A press conference was held by the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, and he called the incident war nerves. Just some nerves, just some whoops, thought I heard something, false alarm. This is insane. Do we think something was actually there? Is this photo a photo of a false alarm? You be the judge. That's why I'm here. Number 6, Spaceman. Look, we've all been photobombed before. It's a blessing in disguise, right? You look back at prom photos, some guy sneezing in the background making a mess, it's the best. But when Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter in an empty marsh long before Photoshop existed, might I add, it appears an astronaut photobombed the family moment. Yeah, Jim assures us that nobody was around, which I personally believe. Otherwise, what a weird photo to take in an otherwise empty field. I'd be like, hi, I don't want to be in this photo. It's weird, right? It makes it more believable. Kodak even got involved in the story, like the company Kodak. They confirmed this photo was not tampered with. Yeah, we're just gonna run everything by Kodak from now on. They were so confident when this happened. Spider-Man leak, Kodak's like, that's Andrew Garfield. That's authentic, that's a real one. Number 5, the Worstead Church. Okay, time to get a little paranormal. We love those. Back in 1975, Peter and Diane Berthelot were visiting the Worstead Church in the UK. So like any other visitor does, Peter took a photo of his lovely wife sitting in this spectacle of a church. But later on, once said photo was developed, somebody else was in the photo. Another photobomb. Or something. There appears to be a person dressed in all white sitting behind Diane, some sort of figure. How calming is that? Just maybe behind you at all times, who knows? When the couple went back to the same church to ask about who it was or what it was, a local suggested that they may have gotten photo proof of the white lady, the spirit of a healer who haunts the church. I mean, as far as surprise ghosts go, that's a pretty tame encounter. That's how it should be, if anything. That's how I hope it goes. God forbid I ever encounter a spirit. Is there one behind me right now? I don't want to look. Number 4, the Black Knight satellite. Not to be confused with Martin Lawrence's The Black Knight. That's a pretty historical and memorable movie in itself. The Black Knight satellite is something that has been orbiting our planet for thousands of years. Everything else in this list is quite recent, all things considered. This myth is an ancient one. This photo here you've probably seen at one point or another. It was taken back in 1998 during an American mission to the International Space Station. Apparently this guy has been hovering over Earth, just watching, just observing us. Some sort of alien satellite, that's the theory here. That's a fun theory, no doubt about it, but during a spacewalk in 1998, one of the thermal covers came loose and drifted away from the station. Could this just be that cover? It just looks sinister because it's in space and the photo just looks grainy. I don't know. These photos were originally shared by NASA and it looks a lot different than a solar sail, in my humble opinion. I'm voting alien satellite. I'm gonna lean into that one. I've been watching that one for a few years. I'm into it. Apparently the Illuminati shot it down back in 2015, but I don't know. That's just the internet being the internet. I was gonna throw that in, but I was like, not enough info on it. So it's definitely a floating alien satellite. Number 3, nursing home spirit. This photo was taken from a nursing home resident the same night another resident had sadly passed away. Good time to take photos and have memories, I guess. This was back in 2015. That night they heard a door open and close a few times, but there were no visitors allowed. So obviously something was afoot. So there's a great amount of people who think that this image here is one of two things: the spirit of said resident that had passed away, or the Grim Reaper. That's scary. If it's one of them, I hope it's the first. The door opening and closing, people think that was the Grim Reaper coming in and doing his Grim Reaper thing and then leaving. That's so scary. I mean, a few comments are saying how it's comforting to know that in the end of your life, you aren't alone and that somebody greets you and, escorts you to the afterlife. I'd rather die alone than have this dude break into my house, to be honest with you, but that's just my opinion. Either way, possible photo of a ghost or the Grim Reaper. How fun is that? Hit the thumbs up for the Grim Reaper. Let's hope we don't see him anytime soon, except for on this list. Number 2, Norway lights. Natural light phenomena is common on our big beautiful planet. The northern lights, for example, the green flash, we've mentioned that before on this channel. Solar eclipses, I bet those were alarming back in ancient times. Just gets dark for a minute and they're like, what happened? Hello? On, please. Some of these natural events look otherworldly, they look cosmic. Most of the time there's an explanation awaiting, but for the mysterious glowing orbs floating over Norway, the Hesdalen lights, as locals refer to them, well, we still need answers for those. Scientists have been trying to gather research for a while now, and in 2014, after many impressive light shows, their best guess so far is that it's a natural battery that charges underground. Yep, whatever that means. Whatever the hell that means. Maybe this has something to do with the reoccurring lights over Phoenix, Arizona. Maybe it's just aliens just bopping about, just doing their alien bopping thing, their usual bopping spots. And finally, number 1, time traveler. Do you believe in time travel? If your answer is no, maybe this last one will change your mind. Hopefully. I'm from the future. It does. And you also hit that thumbs up. I've seen it. And there's many futures. It's a common theme in movies. Back to the Future, Looper, Avengers Endgame. Time travel plots are fun, but they're absolute nonsense. But when we see a case like the Cape Scott story, we can't help but be intrigued just a little bit, right? Could it be? Possibly? Rhyming a little bit? Could it be possibly? Time travel or not, this is an interesting photo. It sticks out. It comes from Ray Peterson's book, The Great Cape Scott Story, and that book was from 1974, but this actual photo was taken over 100 years ago. And there's a modern looking guy in this photo. He looks like he was from yesterday. Rocking shorts, messy morning surfer hair, the thing I'm trying to do apparently in this video. Is that me? Is this my cousin? That's crazy. A photograph from the 40s seems to feature a modern man. Time travel confirmed. That's how we're ending this list. Boom. You're from the future. You saw this coming, right?
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the fire ghost. Wildfires are pretty terrifying things, and they can and will absolutely destroy homes and livelihoods. The past few years have been particularly bad for wildfires across North America. In 2016, a wildfire swept through dry land in Idaho. The fire spread to Jeanette Cadwell's 50,000 acre land in Henry Creek. The land was visited by a fireman who told the Caldwells that they had to evacuate their ranch and that their cabins were more than likely going to burn. Mr. Caldwell snapped this picture, which his wife then shared on Facebook. We see the fire burning, then we see a fireman to the right, but what is that behind him? Jeanette wrote on the image that she shared on Facebook, check out this photo. If you look closely, you can see the fireman's guardian, which is what she called the picture. The fireman's guardian turns out to be a ghostly figure floating above the tree. Jeanette said that she loves it. Now it seems that the Caldwell's family were actually not afraid of the apparition. They think that the fireman ghost saved their property. He was like a guardian angel. Not a guardian angel, an angel or devil from your worst nightmares. At number 9, we have Slender Man. This is an image from the vault of the City of Stirling libraries. Kids are running, playing, there's one climbing a climbing frame, but oh, what is that in the background? It seems this image was found in the library vault, and we see a man under a tree creeping up behind some kids, and oh yes, he does have tentacle arms, and he seems to be wearing a suit. Who could it be? Is it he? I think it might be Slender Man. You can't see any facial features, but he does look a lot like the figure in question, although he does have a bit of a hairdo on him. Is that a mullet I spy? I thought Slender Man was bald, but I'm kind of feeling him with some 80s hair. Legend has it that the photographer of this photo and all 8 children in the image have been missing since 1986. Coming in at number 8, we have the wedding guest. Oh, I know, we're absolutely all here for that fur hooded cape. I love it. The 1970s are my favourite aesthetic era. So anyway, this image is of a bunch of wedding guests amid celebrating a friend's big day. I literally could not see anything wrong with this image at all until my attention was drawn to the tall gentleman on the right leg. Shall we zoom in a little here? Oh, little feet behind him, and if we scroll up, peek a bloody boo, this is horrifying. Do you want some big red circles just to highlight this point? Okay, there you go, and that's enough for me. Please remove this ghost from my life, mind, and memory forever. Coming into number 7, we have Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. Okay, little side note for you. Did you know that the evil queen Snow White never actually said mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Apparently, she said magic mirror on the wall. Fact for you. Facts on facts. Anyway, here is a pretty young lady taking a selfie. We've all been there. I've certainly been there. If I had to guess a year for this picture, I would go with circa 2006. It kind of looks 2006-ish to me. I wonder what year the demon in the background is from though. What demon, Rebecca? The one in the mirror. Coming into number 6, we have Capos Forehead Hungry. Hungry doesn't get enough airtime on most amazing top 10, so I am showing you an image taken in Capos Forehead Hungary, which is around a 2.5 drive south of Budapest. Did you guys know that Hungary is a landlocked country? I never really thought about it until I was scripting this video and I googled it, and then it's like, yep, there it is, they don't have any sea. Anyway, this picture was taken in 1943, and I'm always here for a bit of 1940s vibes. It seems that the image was shared to the internet by Sitsgeti Goyongi. They said that the image is of their mum and was taken by their father. They added, a little girl is standing in the background and she has no arms or no face. They said that they thought it was a ghost or a demon and said that they have the original photograph at home, and I know what you're thinking, show us the original. Here it is! What is happening? That little girl freaks me out. Is she the child of Slender Man? She doesn't have any more arms and he has like tentacle arms, so maybe they can shoot out. My imagination runs wild when I do these videos, I need to be stopped. Coming into number 5, we have the haunted house. Some people think it's weird to take pictures of your home, but honestly, like everyone does it, right? It seems that Paul Sikuro uploaded this image to the internet after his son took it with his camera. His house is in England, and it caught the attention of British media in 2015 after this picture was taken. If you look closely at the window on the left, there is a ghostly apparition peeping out. Mr. Sikuro said, "I was the only person in the house. We're astonished by this image, to say the least. We've lived in this house for about 15 years, and it is a former parsonage." They said that actually they have had strange experiences in the house, as had the previous owner. It certainly seems as if Paul might have caught a ghost on camera. More ghosts at number 4, we've got ghosts for days. This is the samurai ghost. When you come across an online article with the headline, "Has dismembered samurai ghost photobomb little girl's holiday photo," you know that you've actually struck internet gold. So it seems a young Canadian girl was on holiday with her family when her parents snapped a picture of her in sushi at the Kanagawa beach in Japan. Can you see anything wrong with this picture? It seems as if her father snapped the image on his Samsung Galaxy, but then spotted what looks like a pair of boots in the background. The image was shared on Reddit, and the poster said, "Nobody was around when the photo was taken, and certainly nobody was behind her." Her father took about 5 photos of her in this spot over the period of about 2 minutes. Now, one Redditor who responded said that the boots look like samurai boots, which is really odd because it seems that actually the place where the picture was taken is on the site of an ancient samurai tomb. Terrifying. More ghosts at number 3, we have the beer flood ghost. I absolutely love going to the theatre. I go to the theatre as often as I can. Often when I go to the theatre, I like to take a selfie of me and my theatre going pal. Auditorium selfies for absolute days, why not? I love it. Well, what can you see in this picture? Have you seen it yet? Yep. Oh, hello there, ghoul. What's your beef? Why are you looking so angry and cold. This fine pair's just trying to enjoy a performance of We Will Rock You and you've snuck up behind them. There is actually some backstory here and it's pretty interesting. It seems that the theatre that the pair were in is the Dominion Theatre in London. I've been a number of times. A lot of London theatres are rumoured to be haunted, and the Dominion Theatre is no stranger to a ghost story. The theatre ushers that work there will tell you that there are several apparitions, but the one in the photo is rarely spotted. Note how she's kinda blue? Well, it seems like the girl in the picture could be Eleanor Cooper, a young barmaid who drowned at the theatre back when it was a brewery in 1814. An accident at the brewery meant that 1.5 million litres of beer was spilled, flooding the brewery and nearby streets. 7 people died and she was one of them. Now the brewery was demolished in 1922 and in its place stands the Dominion, but are some of the spirits still there? Also, drowned in beer. Gonna need to think about that for a while. This is really sad at number 2, we have Peaches Geldof. In 2013, the daughter of British rock star Bob Geldof took a picture of herself and her baby in the bath. She posted it to Instagram afterwards. Now, do you notice anything weird when you look at it? Because she certainly did. Peaches noted that something was off and she wrote this caption for her picture. Here's a close-up shot of the mystery ghost hand in pic I took of Astela and me in the bath. No, that isn't my hand. One of mine was round his waist to hold him during the photo. The other one was holding the camera to take the shot. Also, the hand is around my shoulder, so a totally weird angle if I did it myself. How terrifying. Now, Peaches actually spoke to the Daily Mail about her experience, and she said she thinks that the hand belongs to the ghost of one of the previous occupants of the home. She said the house was built in the 1920s by a rich man and his pregnant wife. However, his wife had a stillborn baby and was so grief-stricken that she went mad. She apparently drowned herself in the bath. That sends shivers up my spine. Honestly, that could well be, but the tragedy of that home didn't end there. In 2014, Peaches was found dead in the same house, aged just 25. Finally, I want to end this video on a kind of slightly higher note, so we're going with back to school at number 1. The 7th grade is a big deal, right? My mum used to take pictures of me before my first day of school on most years. It's just great to reminisce back to those key years of my life. That is exactly what was happening for Brooke Mills as her mum took her summer is over back to school image. Actually, this literally happened yesterday as of the time of recording this video and it's gone viral. Why? Well, you'll see. Brooke from Alabama is looking really nice in her picture, but I'm sorry, what is that in the background? That's right, it's a snake. It's a literal snake. It's very camouflage, so good job, snaky friend, good job. It's kind of blending into the tree. The snake looks like its head is poised and it's actually about to go for Brooke. The image was posted on Facebook by the girl's dad and promptly went viral. Her mother spoke to WRBI News and said, "Lord, it was scary. I got 2 pictures and said, 'Show your teeth please, baby.' Then I saw the snake. I said, 'Brooke, come here.' And she looked at me like, 'I'm not done taking pictures, Mum.' So then I said, 'Brooke, get away from the tree now.' I said it calmly, but I'm sure my face said it all. Oh my goodness. So actually, I don't know what kind of snake this is, but it looks like a rattlesnake. If you know, let me know.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Victorian memorials. I'm a sucker for dark history, and when it comes to the Victorian era, there is nothing more grim, honestly. Deadly dresses, the great stink, rats everywhere. It's a dangerous time. The life expectancy was of course a lot shorter than it is today. So you really had to hold on to those you loved, right? But this is a time where we don't have iPhones, we don't have Facebook just randomly showing you memories. Remember this? Like, no, stop. So how do you remember a loved one after they've passed away? Well, Victorian mourning jewelry, that's how. In the 1750s, it would be normal to carry with you a gold locket with hair from your past lover. It's, yeah, a little locket of hair. How cool is that? Creepy? A little bit creepy. It was often braided or neatly folded. It wasn't just a ball of hair stuffed in a locket. Although it wasn't not that either, right? It was pretty gross. During Queen Victoria's reign, she would often wear mourning jewelry. She made the locket of hair cool, dare I say. She made it popular. After the death of Albert, she went into a horrible depression. She wore mourning clothes for decades and decades afterwards. That's why you see the Victorian era and everyone's wearing black. Everyone looks all grim. It's because they just followed suit. They just wore what the queen was wearing. Bracelets, necklaces, rings. The enamel of the rings also depends on the type of death that came prior, or the type of mourning that you're doing. White enamel represented death of an unmarried woman. Pearls represented tears. Turquoise meant that you were thinking of them on that day. And eventually pendants with hair became a next step. I'm a fan of mourning jewelry. I like that idea. I wish I knew this sooner. I wish I knew this 10 years ago. I'd be like, oh, my eyebrow piercing? Yeah, it's to mourn my mother. That's why I got it. Sad and rad. Boink. There you go. Number 9. Detroit Ice Fountain. Located on Washington Boulevard, the Detroit Ice Fountain was quite the hazard. A spectacle, but a hazard nonetheless. Back in the early 1900s, a fountain was the talk of the town during colder months. Believe it or not, it's how bored people were, I guess. The water jets would run all year long, so in turn this fountain would freeze and pile up, and then freeze and pile up again and again. Eventually this thing reached up to 60 feet tall, made of pure ice, right on Washington Boulevard. This was so dangerous, yeah, shifting ice, dangling 60 feet above your head on the way to work. Literally tons of ice cracking above your head. The tradition has now moved to Belle Island, thankfully, so now you can safely observe said ice trees. Just, maybe not in the middle of the street anymore. Number 8, adhesive bras. Back in 1949, Life magazine released an article that caught everybody's attention, obviously. May 16th, 1948, the article read, "For 5,000 years, clothes have been draped, tied, buttoned, pinned, and buckled on the human form. This year, for the first time in history, they will be glued on." Bam. How? How did they do it? They changed the game. Could this be? We're gluing on shoes and pants now? Let's do it. Inventor Charles L. Langs changed the game, or so we thought, in 1949. He made bra cups that would stick onto you with adhesive. Just a ring of glue. There you go. This special glue, this adhesive, was promised to leave behind no residue, and it was also supposed to be painless. Yet at the same time, it was supposed to stay glued on, even if you were to jump into a pool from 10 feet high. How? That was the sell. No way. Well, Langs ended up selling the company to Textron because it didn't work. The product ultimately failed because the adhesive needed to be applied every single time you wore said cups. Nobody wants to do that. We're not putting on toothpaste on our bras every morning and sticking them on. And again, they barely even worked, so yeah, none of these, thank you. I'm good. Glue on pants? That'd be sick. Till then, we're not trying that. Number 7, German mascots. German history is of course dark, so dark that YouTube won't even allow us to say certain words about certain people from that time. But we do our best. We like to rhyme, that's how we trick them. For today's list, I thought we'd take a look at Germany's fad of taking photos with polar bear mascots. Yeah, apparently that was a thing. Here in Toronto, we like to pose up next to the raptor or jay, the blue jay. It's always fun. Dap them up, it's always a good time. These photos are part of the teddy bar collection. They span from the First World War to the early 70s. The German bear mascot remained throughout history, but the company surrounding the polar bear mascot of course changed drastically throughout the years, and it's really grim to look at. You see photos of a smiling mascot next to Yahtzee soldiers, and then the next page you see the same German mascot, but 40 years ago. You know what I mean? It's odd, you're like, ugh. It's like seeing the Blue Jay guy back in the 1800s. You're like, what were you doing? Many believe this craze began after 2 polar bears arrived at the Berlin Zoo back in the 1920s. That's where it all kicked off. Because of course it was a major tourist attraction. But these suits, we can't forget, were first worn of course by natives for ritual practices, specifically the native people of Pacific Northwest. Romania as well. Dancers would wear real bear skins as part of a pre-Christian tradition. It was meant to drive away the forces of evil. Or just pose up next to Yahtzee soldiers. That's where we're at recently. Number 6, reindeer games. June 1941, the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, and it was one of the biggest attacks of course in history. Britain and US had to send weapons, supplies, anything really just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. Now they sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle, that was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats. Thankfully the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. So as a gift, as a thank you, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, the World War II submarine, a live reindeer. Yep, for the submarine, just a reindeer for the sub. Doesn't make any sense, right? I agree. The British had to accept because it was ill-mannered if they didn't, so they had to keep a 6-foot-tall real-life reindeer on a sub. Her name was Pollyanna. They brought her on board through a torpedo tube. Imagine being in battle and then having to deal with this after. You're like, guy, we don't need this right now, please. She was a crew member for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, imagine the smell? And she slept better than most. She shared a room in the captain's quarters. Horrible. Finally, the Trident returned home to Britain, and our leading lady was donated immediately to the Regent Park Zoo. Yeah, they didn't keep her on the sub. Weird, right? Number 5, Alfred Hitchcock and the MGM Lion. We're on part 3 now, so things are gonna get a little more bizarre. I'll veer more into the weird, gladly. Like this photo, for example, from 1958, taken by Clarence Sinclair Bull. The photo appears to be, well, it doesn't appear to be, it's Alfred Hitchcock serving tea to Leo the lion. The famous MGM lion, that's him. That's the guy. I want an autograph right now. He loves suspense and tea. Who would have thought? North by Northwest was the only film Hitchcock did with MGM, and there's actually a rumor that he directed The Lion's Roar for the MGM intro. But that of course is nonsense, because you can't direct a lion. Yeah, just a little more lion-like. Awesome, thanks Leo. Let's take lunch. We're killing it. No way, that didn't happen. There have been 7 MGM lions in total, but Leo was known to be the most friendly. He's still in the logo today. He's an OG, he's made it. But again, back in the 1950s, it's hard to say what it really was like on set. You know, like it's still a lion, and it's the 50s. I don't think we have a lot of laws and stuff. It was probably a really rough time for Leo. Number 4, the hobble skirt. Just from this 1910 headline alone, I'm glad we don't have hobble skirts anymore. Although maybe they might make a comeback, we'll see. The headline reads, the hobble skirt is the latest freak in women's fashions. Skirts that are so tight around the ankle that locomotion is seriously impeded and speed is impossible. What a pitch. Doesn't that sound like a bad time already? Sounds like you're gonna be late for everything, honestly. French designer Paul Poirier made these to free the bust whilst also shackling the legs. To keep it a little, keep it classy. What's more classy than shuffling around all day long and being late? Nothing. Love the practicality on this one. Thanks, Paul. So despite how ridiculous and unsafe the hobble skirt looks and acts, only the wealthy could afford such a thing. Damn it, we're missing out. We'll get up next time. Guess I'll just stick with my jeans like a fool. Middle and lower class women wore skirts with slits or buttons. They could actually walk around. Imagine that, eh? What a weird concept. Hobble skirts luckily didn't last, but every now and then I sense a comeback, With the Kardashians, I'm like, that's close. That's close to a hobble skirt. Locomotion is seriously impeded. What a sell. Number 3, Gloria Steinem. Back in 1963, the Playboy Club in New York City was one of Hugh Hefner's greatest accomplishments at the time, of course. The club was the talk of the town until Gloria Steinem came along. See, Gloria was a feminist writer. She created Miss Magazine back in 1972, but her career began much earlier, around the 60s. See, she got a job as one of these Playboy bunnies and worked at the club undercover, secretly taking notes on how this key holders only establishment was actually operating, behind the pages. The staff were these young women, the bunnies of course. They had to wear black bodysuits, the puffy white tails, the whole getup, and at age 28, Gloria worked undercover for 3 weeks. The piece she released after, appropriately titled A Bunny's Tale, got so much attention that it kickstarted her freelance career. It made her a feminist icon to this day. This photo of Gloria undercover shows you the comfortable work outfits that she had to endure. That's horrible. It's all dark too. You can't even see what's going on. People are smoking inside. It's like Peaky Blinders. It's horrible. I don't think she had non-slips on. You know what I mean? In a collection of her writings, Gloria reflects on the undercover piece, saying how it has now outlived all the Playboy clubs, both here and abroad. That was before Hefner passed away in 2017. I'm sure she didn't mean outlive literally by this statement. But she also did, Number 2, Stalin Photoshop. Deepfakes are getting out of control. It's insane. Modern technology is really making it hard to tell what's real and what's not. I'm falling for a lot of things online lately. I'm starting to feel like an old man, I'm not gonna lie. Photoshop is also an essential now for any project. That's probably why you clicked this video. You saw the thumb and you're like, what's this? Photoshop. Back in 1939, a photo of Stalin was published and he looks great. Guy looks amazing, some would say too good. He was touching up photos as far back as 1939 to make himself look more powerful, more healthy. But even if you got a photo with him, there's a chance you would be digitally removed later on. Like Nikolai Yevtsov. Yeah, the leader of the NKVD, he was in a photo with Stalin, but around 1937, Nikolai was responsible for orders that had over 1 million people arrested. And to make matters worse, half of them were executed for crimes against the state. So it wasn't ideal, of course, to be in a photo with Nikolai. He was denounced, imprisoned, and died in 1940, so Stalin had him erased and replaced digitally in that photo. This man was ahead of his time. Even today we're replacing actors in movies with different actors, and you wouldn't even know it. And finally, number 1, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Yes, we all remember hearing about this at one point, even if you wanted to or not. Bill Clinton talking about not having relations with that woman. Yeah, back when we had to download music on LimeWire, this would just pop up out of nowhere and blow your eardrums out. This was a huge scandal. This was that scandal. It was 1998. Clinton White House intern Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old and they had a relation from 1995 to 1997. Lewinsky said she hooked up with Bill 9 different times at the White House. Of course, you have to count. You're at the White House, obviously, you're keeping note. And apparently, according to her schedule, Hillary Clinton was also at the White House for at least 7 of those days. Hey, big yikes. Whenever I see this photo, I wish I was alive to see this unfold in real time. I mean, I was alive, but I was, you know what I mean.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Salem UFO. On the morning of July 16, 1952, this photo was captured by Shell Alpert and has stumped people ever since. The photo shows 4 unidentified objects hovering in the air above Salem, Massachusetts, and was taken at the Salem Coast Guard Air Station. The objects seem to be above the Winter Island and Cat Cove areas, but there really isn't much more that is known about this strange incident. There are a few theories regarding this photo. One is a camera glitch, others think it may just be light reflecting off of the window that the photo was taken through, but of course there are people who point to similar incidents that happened in the 1950s, and of course believe it is proof of extraterrestrial beings. It is very likely we may never know exactly what's going on here, but the air of mystery it leaves is definitely kinda cool. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Frozen Man of Mount Everest. This photo comes from 1996 and it shows Beck Weathers getting treated after the Mount Everest disaster. The Mount Everest disaster took place on May 10th and 11th in 1996, where there was a blizzard on the mountain that ended up stranding and taking the lives of 8 people who were aiming to descend the mountain. Beck was a part of the team who was climbing the mountain on this fateful day, and he ended up suffering from snow blindness during the climb. He actually fell into a hypothermic coma because it was so cold, and he suffered severe frostbite on his face, hands, and feet. Pretty miraculously, he not only survived, but ended up walking back down to camp in order to get help, where he was then taken by helicopter to receive treatment. He ended up needing his hands, parts of his feet, and even his nose amputated, but he survived this whole ordeal, and that is the most important thing. In our number 8 spot today, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or most chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at a reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What makes this photo what it is, however, is that there are seemingly 2 reflections looking back up at this little girl. No one knows who this girl is, where she is, or even when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. This photo was analyzed and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see the reflection of, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 7 spot today, we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it is called an elephant's foot. No, it's of course not a real elephant's foot, and instead is just called that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still produce a deadly amount even today. Like, so much so that just a few minutes of being around it is enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it. For a long time, the severity of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was being kept a secret from the public and those who it mattered to the most. Photos like these only give us a glimpse into this horrible disaster and how things went down. In our number 6 spot today, we have the penitentiary. This photo comes from what is left of the Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. This prison used to be the most famous and the most expensive in the world, but now this is the sort of thing that is left of it. This prison is actually now used as a tourist attraction, and it becomes a haunted house during Halloween. The prison used to house some pretty high-profile prisoners, such as Scarface himself, Al Capone. The prison was opened in 1829 and was known for its advanced technology for the time. They had things like central heating, flush toilets, and shower baths in each cell. These were all considered luxuries in 1829. The first prisoner to be held there was Charles Williams, who was facing a 2-year sentence for theft. When he arrived at the prison, he had a hood over his head so as to protect his identity, but also so that he wouldn't know what the rest of the prison looked like, so he would never be able to plan an escape. While prison is never good, the craziest thing about this specific one is that all of the prisoners lived in isolation. I can't even imagine what that would be like, especially for the people who found themselves there for a long period of time. This photo is just a truly haunting reminder of all that once went on in this prison. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. This photo comes from 1971 during the Stanford Prison Experiment. For those of you who aren't familiar with this experiment, it started on August 14th, 1971 and was led by university psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. The experiment took student volunteers and divided them into 2 groups, one group of prisoners and one group of guards, and they placed all of the volunteers into a fake prison that was created for this experiment. The experiment aimed to see if and how quickly humans would turn evil under the right conditions with the right amount of power. Basically, it was a test to try and answer the question of if humans are inherently good or inherently evil. I think everyone was pretty shocked with the results. After just 6 days, the experiment needed to be concluded because the guards began absolutely tormenting the prisoners. It really showed the kinds of things humans can be capable of, even after a short time. This photo is definitely reminiscent of that experiment, and it serves as our reminder. In our number 4 spot today, we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from the inside of a house of one of the most terrible people, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a full drum of acid that was located inside of his home. I probably don't need to tell you what it was used for, because who has a full drum of acid inside of their home? Especially when you're a serial killer. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Gadget. This photo shows the first ever atomic bomb, and it comes to us from 1945. Called the Gadget, this bomb was an implosion plutonium device that was detonated in the Trinity test in 1945. This photo shows someone sitting next to it, so casually like it's a stuffed animal and not like it's a world-changing device. The Trinity test was the very first time a nuclear weapon was detonated, and the Gadget was actually of the same design as the bomb that was later detonated over Nagasaki, Japan on August 9th, 1945. There is a very eerie nature about this photo and the seemingly casual behavior of the man next to it. Did he know what this was about to unleash? Perhaps not, but more eerily, maybe he did. In our number 2 spot today, we have Change. This photo was taken by Fred Blackwell on May 28, 1963, and is actually showing us a moment of protest. The 3 sitting at the counter are Joan Trompour, Anne Moody, and their sociology teacher, John Salter. The reason why this photo is so important is because these 3 are sitting at a quote white-only counter at Woolworth's Five and Dime store in Jackson, Mississippi, while being attacked by an angry mob. People are throwing condiments at them, and I'm sure saying some pretty nasty things. The 2 students went to Tougaloo College, which was a black college that ended up being at the core of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. It's amazing to see how brave they are, and a photo like this is really such an important message for us to remember today. In our number 1 spot today, we have Bikini Island. Bikini in the Marshall Islands was once inhabited by around 170 islanders until 1945 rolled around. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future, since this was shortly after the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. The residents of the island were asked to vacate, quote, for the good of mankind and to end all world wars, to which they of course obliged, under the impression that they would one day be able to move back. Test weapons were detonated on the reef itself, on the sea, in the air, and underwater, and this photo shows what was happening during just one of these tests, and it wasn't even the largest one. Although the former residents of Bikini were promised that they would one day be able to return home, the island still remains uninhabited because of the mass amounts of radiation that still exist here. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the reenactment. This photo is extremely unsettling, and for a very good reason. If, when you look at this photo, your instincts tell you that the guy in them is creepy, ding ding ding, You're right. This is a photo that features the German serial killer Joachim Kroll. He is known for taking the lives of 14 people, all varying in age, and he is known for also consuming parts of their flesh. This monster was caught in 1976, and he was discovered when police found out that he had clogged the plumbing in his apartment with remains of one of his victims. How gruesome is that? This photo was taken shortly after he was caught and arrested, and what you're seeing is Kroll reenacting one of his crimes for the police. I get goosebumps just thinking about that. I couldn't imagine being there, or being the police officer he's on top of. Talk about terrifying. I'm just glad that they caught him and got him off of the street. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Pioneer's Defense. This photo is known as the Pioneer's Defense, and man, does it ever look creepy. This photo comes from 1937, and it was taken by a Russian photographer named Viktor Bulla. This photo takes place in the Leningrad area, which is now known as St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia. The people in this photo were part of a group that was the 1930s Russian equivalent of our Boy Scouts that was called the Young Pioneers. The masks on their faces leaves a very eerie feeling, and for a fair reason. These people were doing a military preparation drill, which is the reason for the gas masks. This photo was taken during a time when the country was under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, and the residents were constantly unsure of what was going to happen. The country was already seeing death, and people were already frightened just a few years before the start of World War II, and those in this photo felt the need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. In our number 8 spot today, we have the net test. This photo comes to us from 1958, and it is quite an interesting one. At a first glance, it looks fun, but then when you catch the expression on the person's face and look a little more into it, it really just leaves you with a ton of questions as to what exactly is going on here. It looks like a guy is going on some sort of a roller coaster ride, but what is actually happening is that a prisoner is being used to test safety nets before they were mass produced. Yeah, not the good time we thought it was. This comes from a time where capital punishment was much more widespread throughout the United States, and those waiting on death row couldn't just sit around waiting for their day to come. I think it's probably best that we made the switch to crash test dummies and that sort of thing, and this photo just remains as an eerie reminder of the less than great choices that were made in the past. In our number 7 spot today, we have a burst of joy. You might be looking at this photo wondering how this extremely joyous photo could hold any dark secrets. Well, this photo won a Pulitzer Prize, and for a good reason. This photo was captured by Slava Vetter on March 17, 1973 at the Travis Air Force Base in California. This photo shows United States Air Force Lieutenant Robert L. Sturm and his family. This was taken as he was being reunited with his family after 5 years of being held as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. On October 27, 1967, he was leading a flight of F-105s when he was shot down over Hanoi and held captive until March 14, 1973. I can't imagine what this must have been like for his family, because there was a huge chance that he could have not come home at all. The looks on their faces, of course, clearly show that this photo is capturing an exceptionally joyful moment. It's just the story behind this moment that leaves us all with that unsettling feeling. In our number 6 spot today, we have Ghost Boy. This photo is said to have been taken inside of the infamous Amityville Horror House in 1976. It is said that this creepy vintage photo is still one of the most chilling paranormal photos of all time. Yep, that's right, this photo is said to be of a ghost. After the DeFeo killing, the next owner of the house, George Lutz, swore that the house was haunted, and he called in none other than Ed and Lorraine Warren, the most famous paranormal investigators ever. On one night of the investigations, they set up an automatic camera on the second floor of the house, and this photo is said to have been caught then. Some believe that the ghostly face staring back is that of a young John Defoe who lost his life in this house. I'm not 100% sure either way, but what I am sure of is that if this is actually a photo of a ghost and not a real person, that is ridiculously creepy. In our number 5 spot today, we have a UFO report. This is less of a photo and is actually more like a PDF, but I still felt like it applied to today's list. This is a previously classified document from 1963. Although the document still has a ton of information that has been blacked out, the document is the description and report of an unidentified flying object, or a UFO encounter. This is said to have taken place over the desert of Nevada, and the report was written in detail in order to have a written record of the event. This document is said to have been the authentic report from the FBI, which is exactly why some of the details have still been omitted. This might seem like less of a big deal now, as in this day and age we have declassified video footage of similar kinds of encounters, but for 1963 this was huge. As discussions of alien or extraterrestrial life is a big part of our modern day society, this document shows that these things have been on our minds for many, many years now. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Apollo 1 prayer. This photo was originally taken and meant to be a sort of lighthearted prank or joke, but it would later turn out to be a chilling image. This photo shows the Apollo 1 crew jokingly praying over a miniature model of their command module. The 3 men in the photo are Roger Chaffee, Virgil Grissom, and Ed White, and sadly during a test launch on January 27, 1967, they all burned to death. To make this story even worse, prior to the test, the 3 of them had voiced concerns about the amount of flammable material that was on the craft. The fire was determined to have been caused by an electrical fault, and it spread extremely quickly due to combustible nylon material coupled with the high-pressure pure oxygen atmosphere in the cabin. They also were unable to be rescued or escape because the plug door hatch couldn't be opened against the internal pressure of the cabin. Before this test, it was believed that since there was no fuel on the rocket, it would be relatively safe, which is exactly why there wasn't more preparedness in case of emergency. Looking back now, this photo is certainly more mysterious than anyone at the time could have ever imagined. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Hilo tsunami. This photo comes to us from April 1st, 1946. This is the day when an 8.6 magnitude earthquake hit just off of the coast of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. As we all know, earthquakes can often have after effects, and this one sent shockwaves throughout the Pacific. This led to the formation of an ocean-wide tsunami that had waves reaching up to 13 stories high. This disaster went on to strike Hilo, Hawaii, in what became one of the worst disasters in Hawaiian history. This photo somehow survived the disaster, and it captures the terrifying view someone must have had in their last moments. This photo is especially chilling to view just days after the Tonga volcano eruption occurred. The Earth and these naturally occurring disasters are absolutely terrifying and powerful and unpredictable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the shadows. As most of us know, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. This was devastating to the city, and of course we can understand the implications of this. This photo shows what is called a nuclear shadow, and this is just one that could be seen throughout the city. When the bomb detonated 1,900 feet above the center of the city, the explosion caused temperatures of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to spread through everything within 1,600 feet of it. This of course destroyed nearly everything and everyone within a mile of it. The light and heat from the bomb was so powerful that it bleached the exposed surfaces of the city, except as seen here, where an unsuspecting person was shielding the surface with their own body. It is truly such an eerie reminder of the impact that this really had. In our number 1 spot today, we have the crash. This is one of those photos that was just taken in the right place at the right time, but it shows a very scary situation. A man named Jim Meads is said to have taken this photo in 1962. The story goes that a man named Bob Sauray had mentioned to Jim that he was going to fly this plane, called the Lightning, the following day. Jim took his kids out for a walk that next day and took his camera with him, intending to get a shot of the aircraft as Bob flew it. He wanted to get a photo of his children with the airfield in the background just as the plane was coming into land. They found the spot, they got all set up, just waiting for the plane to return. Turns out that day Bob didn't fly the plane, and instead the pilot was actually a man named George Aird, who was another test pilot. So George is up in the plane and he realizes that there's trouble. Since I don't know plane language, I'm gonna use this quote from fearoflanding.com, which wrote, quote, "Whilst carrying out a demonstration flight, there was a fire in the aircraft's reheat zone. Unburnt fuel in the rear fuselage had been ignited by a small crack in the jet pipe and had weakened the tailplane actuator anchorage. This weakened the tailplane control system, which failed with the aircraft at 100 feet on final approach. This led to the plane pitching up aggressively as George came into land. George lost control and he ejected in order to save himself. Luckily, since the nose had pitched up, he had just enough time. The tractor driver in this photo was then 15-year-old Mike Sutterby, who had spent that summer working on this airfield. He wasn't actually posing, he was telling Jim to move since he wasn't supposed to be there, before turning to look at what was happening behind him. This is all what led to this photo being snapped and this story surviving all of these years. In the end, George was okay aside from some minor injuries, and while Jim didn't get the photo he set out for that day, he still got quite an interesting one.